So, like, the ultimate question that I want to ask is, why is suffering part of the human condition?
Well, that's a pretty good question, David. What do you think?
I think what I've always been taught is that the reason why we suffer is because if we didn't have suffering, then we wouldn't really know what happiness is or what joy is, and it kind of like helps us appreciate the differences and like to actually realize what joy is, right? Because if we had like Christmas every day, would Christmas really be special, you know? And so I think part of life is through that suffering and through the hardships, we come to appreciate the things that we do have, and it gives our soul even more joy. That's what I've been taught.
So, do you think it's possible there's like some other realm or existence where like basically you don't have to go through that suffering at all? It's just always peaceful.
I think so. I believe that there is some kind of world, whether it's a physical world or a spiritual world. There is some kind of world that either does exist or will exist, where there really isn't any pain or suffering or anything like that. That it's just like relief from all those burdens. I kind of mentioned that in the Bible a few times with like a place of paradise and stuff. But
Yeah, I wonder if that would be like a different existence entirely, like a whole different realm, like or universe, or if that would be like just here in this realm that we already live in, but just farther down the road, like you know, every like periodically we'll have that peace, but like
well, yeah, we have things like the city of Enoch as an example, right? Like they were a perfect society, right? And supposedly they were so righteous and their society was so perfect that they were taken up to heaven. So
So, do you ultimately think that suffering is necessary?
I think it is for for a few reasons, because like with like sports for one, you know, like if you just got handed a trophy saying, oh, you won this like award, you know, or anything, you won this award, and you didn't really do anything for it, would you really care about the award?
Makes sense. Like, you wouldn't want to. Basically, you have to kind of like train your muscles, and you have to kind of stretch your
Yeah.
muscles in order to make them grow, and so you have to go through that developmental process.
Yeah.
So, kind of like you were saying before, I kind of think that suffering is necessary, and it's part of the human condition because it's necessary. And the city of Enoch was translated into heaven, and I kind of wonder if it was because they were able to make the unconscious conscious. And what I mean by that is there's a universal law, as above, so below, as within, as without. And so it's kind of like our subconscious is on autopilot. But if we can be able to figure out why we do what we do and bring our shadow side to light, a shadow side coined by Carl Jung, the psychologist Carl Jung, if we're able to bring our shadow side to light and become more aware of that, then we'll become more self-actualized as a person. And so maybe that's the root cause of suffering.
so maybe like if we were to as a whole all reach that point, like where we just are developed enough, like spiritually and everything, that we could as a whole like basically be taken up to heaven or something, like the city of Enoch. Apparently I've heard I'm not sure where this story comes from exactly or much about it honestly, but I've heard there's like some monks that live somewhere, like or it was something, either monks or like a tribe of Native Americans or something, but by meditating, like when like a army came to like capture them or like to harm them, they were able to like meditate like all together as a whole and make their entire city or village invisible so the enemy couldn't see them. I wonder if that's kind of like a similar achievement.
That's very fascinating. I've heard that in like, I don't know much about it, but like in the religion of shamanism, there was this book that I was reading one time about it, and it was saying that if you want to be invisible, you just have to think that yourself that you are invisible and like say to yourself, I'm invisible, I'm invisible. And so I think that if that's possible, then maybe it would be possible collectively as a whole village to do that. And that maybe that is how the city of Enoch was translated.
I kind of look at it as like learning from like others' experience rather than your own, right? Like there's some people who they have a lot and they've never really been in a situation where they haven't had that much, but they're just able to be grateful for what they do have, right? They don't need to go in that situation where they don't have much and they're in poverty. They already have a lot. But in society and in the world, we see people who they just kind of like, unless they experience suffering themselves, they won't learn, right? But I believe that we're able to kind of have joy and have those things and have happiness without experiencing it. But I think we do have to raise and be more aware of what's going on around us.
So do you think that there's like past lives and that kind of thing where like in a previous life you would have experienced more suffering, so the next life there's less suffering in that next one? Or
I think that it's like, I don't know if it's like you experience different things in different lives so that you could kind of grow, like a step-by-step thing. Like you experience this thing in this life and experience a different thing in the next life, and they're kind of equally difficult but in different ways. Or if it's like you have one experience that's really difficult, and then if you do well, then you go on to a better experience. I'm not really sure. That's a good question, though.
When it comes to like the reincarnation idea, there are some that believe that the light you see when you die is just, the light you're seeing when you're born. Like you're literally just coming back to life again. And maybe we're in this circle of life that continues over and over again because there's lessons we have to learn, and if we don't learn them, we have to repeat them. And it's like until our subconscious can become conscious of itself, we have to repeat it. And there's a question about like, why is the veil necessary? Like, why do we have to forget our former life in order to come back into another one? And what's interesting is I feel like there's varying degrees of the veil. Some people come back with more knowledge about their past than others. So I don't really understand why that is, but it seems necessary that you might have to forget certain things in order for to see if your soul truly did advance to the point where it can make decisions not based on memory, but based on its attitude, if that makes sense. So, I don't know, do you guys have anything to add about like the concept of like in the Mormonism, like the one eternal round concept? Like, in that concept, like progression itself is just an eternal round. So, is it just this life that we're repeating over and over again, or do we repeat this life over and over again and then go to another world, repeat that over and over again forever? Is that basically what the infinity is?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure exactly because Mormonism, like, we believe that it's like you live one life but you continually progress to become like God necessarily, but I don't really know exactly how you would progress after this life. Like, I'm not really sure what kind of steps you would take. Like, because you live this life and you learn a lot, but we're always told that you can't really reach perfection in this life, but that'll be down the road. So I'm not really sure how you can reach perfection without.
I almost wonder if like really what it is like we're all part of God basically. Like, we're all like God is like the all. That's what it says in the Kabbalion book, that it's the all. So that would mean that we are all God. We are all a part of God basically. And it's like when you think of like an ocean and like a drop of water, and when the drop of water like goes into the ocean, there's no distinguishing the drop of water, the droplet from the ocean. It's just the same thing. It's a whole. And so it's almost like we are all God experiencing the world again, experiencing life again, like mortality again. Like God got bored and wanted to just experience it again, and he's just trying out all our different lives.
Well, it's kind of interesting because most Christian religions say that we're children of God, right? Like we're the offspring of God, and it's interesting because one person just by themselves isn't really anything, right? Like, if one selfish person just does, if one selfish king just does their own thing, they become kind of like nothing, like. But people who are based off of like humanity and who do things for others, who are selfless, and who treat everyone like with respect and with kindness, they become so much more, because being one and being with society, we become so much more elevated. But when we're in a selfish state and thinking just for ourselves, we become nothing. Like, just in the world, we're 1 in 7 billion or 8 billion, right? And just 1 in the 7 to 8 billion isn't really anything, whereas like the dust of the earth. But all of us together, unified, become so much more. So
Yeah, I really like that. I kind of feel like the way I like to look at life is that everyone you meet is a reflection of you. And so it's just another version of you that you're seeing in everybody that you meet. And I like that because then it's like it goes hand in hand with the golden rule, do unto others as you want done unto yourself. And if everyone's a reflection of you, then you would want to treat them best you can, so that others would also treat you the best that they can. And it kind of just keeps that charity going. So another fascinating question would be, what would your ideal world be like? What would be different? What would you make different in your ideal world in comparison to this one?
I think the first thing is there'd be less hate and less division in the world. I think that's something that a lot of leaders, like a lot of corrupt leaders, always try to push on people. Is they want to divide people, and we can see that in society right now, right? Like there's this race versus this race, and this gender is women are better than men, or men are better than women, and I think it's just this big thing where we're all just kind of divided, when really in a perfect world we're all equal. But I feel like equality is like that word is pushed, but I feel like people in today they don't really understand what that word means. They just think, oh, equality is like a teeter-totter, where it's like 50 years ago this race got treated better, so now today this race will get treated better than that race, you know, like it's like a teeter-totter.
That's an interesting
but they're
way
not
of
really
looking at
ever
it.
equal. It's just one goes above the other, and it keeps that moving up and down, up and down.
It's often said that like one group wants equality of opportunity and the other wants equality of outcome. And equality of opportunity is what the American dream, I believe, was founded upon, that no matter what your class is, your social class, or how you were born, you are able to ascend that, and you are not that, and you are what you make yourself to be. And that's kind of like the American dream, and America's supposed to offer that opportunity for even the smallest of men to be able to become something greater through hard work and perseverance. But then the equality of outcome is trying to force everyone to have the same life and the same opportunity and the same everything, when that's not what life is about, because everyone's life is so diversely different. So I don't know, that's what makes me think of when you were saying equality, is those two camps of thought.
So you think like something like Black Lives Matter or like a Black History Month or something is like a useful tool for that equality, to reach equality like that?
I don't think so. I think that's more just like the teeter-totter, because like it's just focusing on this one race, or this one, like it's either Black Lives Matter or this thing, you know. Really, if it was a perfect world, it'd be everybody, because to be honest, it's one race, right? Really, no person's better than anyone else, no matter what gender or what race they are. We're all really from the same, you know, we're just people, right? We all have emotions, we all have thoughts, we all have wants and needs, and our desires, and our fears as well. And so everyone should be treated, you know, with kindness and with respect. And so when you just say, we're gonna focus on this one race, Black History Month, or women's rights specifically right now, it kind of, I feel like it kind of pushes the other one to where like, oh, we're not gonna focus on the other one, and so it's just a teeter-totter.
It almost kind of puts emphasis on the fact that they're different somehow. That there's a difference there, you know?
Exactly. I think Morgan Freeman, I think there was a video where he talked about how he was asked like about Black History Month and like race and stuff, and he just said, stop talking about it. You know, like, just stop talking about the whole race thing, you know? Like, we always talk about it as if like we're different and all these different things, but to be honest, we're all the same, right? Like, we're all just people. We all just want to be loved and to be respected and to be able to have freedom and to do things that we want to do.
That makes a lot of sense. Like, I definitely think the division is a really horrible issue that's happening in this world. That's like one of the biggest things that I think is causing a lot of the problems that we see. And like divide and conquer, that's that's how you conquer an enemy, you know. And I feel like we are really under attack from lots of different fronts. I think there's physical threats as well as spiritual threats that we're facing daily. They try to keep us divided within ourselves and divided within our families and within our societies as a whole. And I think that coming together as one human family rather than being divided by race and gender and religion and status and so many other things, it would definitely benefit us. And kind of like going back from how we were talking about the city of Enoch a while back, by becoming more united in our thinking and our heart and mind. I think it says in the Book of Mormon, like when the people were of one heart and one mind, that's when they lived out the manner of happiness. And so I think that what that's ultimately saying is when we're all able, as a society collectively, able to think the same kind of value, have the same values, the same kind of thoughts and ideas about what we want the future to be, then we're able to create that. But right now I kind of feel like the world's heading towards a future based on fear.
Well, I think it's interesting because I feel like, at least from my perspective, I feel like it almost seems impossible to create that society to where everyone's really equal and everyone has freedom and everyone has what they need, you know, as far as like food and water and homes. Like all across, you know, like the world, you see so many people who are starving and then other people who have like mental health issues and all kinds of different things, right? Like there's so many problems and so much division and so much hate and so many things that are wrong with the world that I always think, how could we really ever like make really a difference? You know, like how do you guys think we can make a difference?
Well, almost the best way would probably be just your own mindset. I mean, like you heard about the breatharian and stuff and that kind of thing, where you just basically live without even eating. You know, I mean, obviously that's like a pretty far a pretty hard accomplishment, you know, to reach, but basically that kind of gives hope that like that's a possibility, that like we could actually achieve that at some point. And so if we all were aware of that and strive for something like that, you know, but not just breatharian, but just like spirituality in general, you know, we have so many spiritual senses that we just don't ever use. We don't even know we have them, basically. And so really, if we were all just to head down that spiritual path, I think, of opening your mind and just awakening to all these, you know, ancient truths, basically, that we could collectively as a whole, you know, shift over to a more positive outlook on everything.
Going along with that, I definitely kind of feel that it's kind of like bringing your unconscious aspects of yourself to the light. Like they always say, come to the light. Christ is the light, the truth. And it's because when you gain awareness of why you are who you are and why you do what you do, then you're able to change those patterns about yourself. Whereas before they were just on autopilot and they weren't discernible to you. But then through the light of the truth, as you're discovering yourself and discovering the world around you, it's like a reflection. Like the world's a reflection of your inner, the world's condition is a reflection of our inner state. And so it's really important that when we see wars and rumors of wars and different things happening in the world and there's so much fear, it's basically an external representation of what's happening internally within us.
I think it's interesting how you talk about like self-awareness and like being aware of ourselves, because I feel like everyone goes through this, and I feel like just a lot of people go through times where they don't really know why they're doing what they're doing. They just go to work, wake up, go to work, go to school, they come home, they watch TV for a second, and they don't really know exactly what they're doing, why they're doing what they're doing, right? They have their beliefs and things that they hope for, but they don't really know exactly who they are. And I always feel like the biggest thing that people need is a purpose, you know? And I feel like a lot of times we've either been given a false purpose of like stand up for something that's not necessarily true, or we just don't really have a purpose. We're just kind of just running on a treadmill all day long, and not really accomplishing anything, and not really figuring out who we are and how we can help change the world and change ourselves, like our inner world, like you were talking about.
For sure, and what you're saying, having a belief is really having something to believe in, a purpose is something really important. And I feel like the world is in a state of nihilism, where we believe that nothing has any meaning at all, and so there's no purpose in anything. So people are just wandering around aimless and feeling, at least people feel worthless and as if they have no value to offer anything or anyone. But nothing could be further than the truth. I think the truth is that we're, because of the fact that we exist, that it shows and proves to us that we have meaning and purpose.
Well, it's interesting because even like people who are homeless, right? You would think from like a logical standpoint that they don't really have much worth, right? They're just by themselves homeless. But the truth is that because they're homeless and that problem, it makes other people have to open up their heart to help those people. And that makes a big difference, right? Because that's the whole point of everything, is to love others. And so people who are struggling even though they don't have much value as far as like what they have, they matter because they're a person, and they can help change somebody else's heart. And that's the biggest difference that we can make in life.
Kind of like the value of life is what's mostly important.
Yeah.
And I feel like society has forgotten that. A lot of people are for example, abortion, and I think that is something that is ultimately, fundamentally, shows that as a society, we don't really value life, even in its earliest forms. And also with the elderly, we don't really treat the elderly the best either. We don't really have respect for our elders like we used to. So it's like we don't really value life in its beginning moments or ending moments, and most of our working life is spent for self-fulfillment purposes or egoic purposes, and oftentimes we even get lost in just serving corporations or our jobs blindly and never really live out our purpose. And that's what causes us to feel as if nothing has any meaning. But when you step into your authenticity and who you're supposed to be, that's when purpose is given to you.
Well, also, just the way the system works and the way the things we're taught and stuff growing up, like, it kind of just gives us this idea that we are meaningless in a way. Like, we don't really have a lot of purpose, and that we just kind of evolved from monkeys or something. And we live on a ball that's spinning around that is basically just a chaotic nightmare, that no God in their right mind would ever create something like that. So it just, obviously they're trying to hide the fact that we do have a lot of purpose and a lot of this whole existence is made for us, and that really it's important that we are aware of that, because that's how we can access our spiritual senses and stuff, is to be aware of our existence, basically, and accept that we actually are really connected with spirituality and like the cosmos, and it's all one, and that it's all made for us personally.
Yeah, I definitely love the idea of interconnectedness. I'm pretty sure, I can't remember where, but in the Bible it says that, I think it's Ecclesiastes somewhere, it says that we're all connected. As something happens to a beast, it happens to us. We're all of one breath. And I think that's really important to remember, because I think it says, as one dieth, so dieth the other. And like so many, for example, right now animal species are dying, and all kinds of wildlife things are dying. And I think that also affects the world and us ultimately. I think it was Einstein that says, like, if bees go extinct, then like humans, I think it's like 8 years or something, I don't even know, but not very much time left if bees go extinct. And I think that just in many respects humans are so, well, I guess just to clarify, a lot of times governments make it seem like the average person is so greedy towards nature, when I kind of think that in essence, a lot of the governments and corporations that are pushing many of the Green New Deals and stuff like that are actually the ones causing the most climate damage, in my opinion. Many of the world's leading people who are fighting global climate change fly around in private jets and release way more carbon emissions than the most average person will do. And so they try to limit the average person's freedom while they try to exacerbate their own. And that's ultimately, I think, the problem with the world.
Yeah. I think another big problem is that goes along with all this is the lack of empathy. I feel like, kind of like what you were talking about with how what happens to someone else or what happens to an animal will affect us ultimately. And when we have empathy, we think like, oh, if I hurt someone, I feel bad about it, right? That's how we should all be. We should all feel bad if we do something wrong, or if we see someone in pain, right? We should have the empathy of, oh, I can kind of feel and put myself in in their shoes of what they're feeling. And so because they're hurting, I'm hurting. But what we see is a lot of people, like narcissism is going up, like narcissistic traits are going up in everybody, in society as a whole. And we see a lot more of a lack of empathy. And in the scriptures, it kind of says like the love of man will wax cold in the last days. And I do feel like love and empathy and those kind of things that we care for people and we care for animals and we just care for every living creature is just kind of gone. And even for ourselves, right? I feel like we kind of lack empathy for ourselves. Like so many people hate themselves and they're just like, oh, I'm just terrible, or it makes them hate other people. And I just think the lack of empathy, and it starts from our leaders. I think our leaders have no empathy, and they're all psychopaths, and they're just out to get what they want, and that causes us to kind of follow that path without knowing it.
Yeah, and I kind of think that as a culture, as a society, we get the leaders that we deserve as a people, and it's also kind of a reflection of the people. I think our leaders, though, are definitely corrupt, and they're definitely like puppets for a higher agenda that's meant to enslave and control the human population, because humans are so powerful that they need us to be blind in order to keep consuming the energy that we give off. Because once we become aware of ourselves, of who we really are, they lose their existence because we find ours. And so the Bible talks about how this world is controlled by Satan, and I believe that's actually the case. Like, truthfully, every institution and everything in this world is controlled by Satan, and he has his mirror image of God's gospel. And so there are people who literally, Luciferians, Freemasons, different people who believe that Satan is the light bearer and that he's actually the one we should serve. And that leads people to do atrocities because they're doing it in the name of freedom and liberation and do what thou wilt, as Aleister Crowley would say. And that's ultimately the will of Satan, and that's where the world's going right now. It's do what thou wilt. And so it's like, but that also means do what thou wilt at the cost of anybody else, because it's only about self-preservation and power. But like you were saying, we need empathy, and it's definitely, I think there are people who are born nowadays that consider themselves empaths, but I think a large majority of people are narcissistic and think about themselves alone.
Yeah, exactly. If you were to elaborate on that quote by Aleister Crowley, like the "do as thou wilt" quote, if he were to continue that quote and say, as so long as you don't harm anybody else or something along those lines, then it would be a good quote to live by. Do as thou wilt, so long as you don't harm anybody else, or infringe upon anybody's freedom. But he obviously didn't elaborate farther there, and so you have to kind of assume that it is at the expense of anybody's in anyone else's free will. So
I think it's all just kind of like a Bug's Life, right? Like we're just kind of told that like we have to just work every day and kind of feed the grasshoppers, figuratively speaking, But in reality, we have more power than the leaders. We have more power than any corrupt person. But the truth is like that one ant that stood up, right? All the other ants kind of hated him, like, oh, you're messing things up, you know? When he was the only one who was actually going against or going for what would help them have freedom, right? But it's interesting because we're all told, oh, you have freedom. Like you're born, oh, you have freedom. Oh, you have this, you have that. When in reality, we don't really have those things, but we're told that we have those things. And so we never really think there's a problem. We're just like, oh, I'm content living my life, not having freedom, not really knowing who I am. And I think because of that, we lose ourselves, and that's why we don't really have empathy, because we're just thinking, I gotta get to work, you know, I don't have time to help that person on the side of the road that needs help. I gotta be on time to work, you know, everything's so strict, and we're so focused on serving our masters that we forget to serve those who are truly in need.
That's really profound, actually, to say that. Like, we get so caught up doing things that we think we have to do that we're missing the purpose of what we actually came here to do. And that is to ultimately love people. And it's interesting because if we all had that perspective as like of love towards one another, the world would be transformed instantly. But we're focused so much on, maybe even it's too much of the future. Our society is so focused on the future of our own personal lives, like, oh, retirement, my job, my career, what my kids are going to do, what I want to do, what goals I have. Like, everyone's just so focused on me that we forget that we all have talents that we're supposed to express and cultivate in order to help those around us. But sometimes we get so caught up in ourselves that we don't actually use our talents for others, and we just use them for really no apparent reason other than self-satisfaction, which leads us to feel a sense of not having purpose for our lives, because when we don't help other people, we ultimately are aimless.